All right, what's up, party people? It's the Sunny Ray Show. We're building on Bitcoin. Today, I've got one of my favorite people on planet Earth, Antoine De Vuyst. We've known each other for, oh my God, far too long. Over
Yeah, no,
10, maybe
thanks.
12 years.
Thanks for that, man. You're one of my favorite people too. Thank you.
Yeah, we hang out a lot. So we got a lot,
Yeah,
lot to share. We did an interview, I don't know, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago for the world, right? Where we talked a little
yeah,
bit
that's
about it.
been
Maybe I'll link to that post or to that interview so people can kind of get some of the background info. But for the people who are maybe listening for the first time, let's start. Oh, by the way, you might want to move your camera down a little bit so we get your full face. But
yeah.
let's just maybe start with a general, introduction in terms of I guess the first thing will be, what's your story? Is the question I love to ask. And since we've already done an episode, we can keep it, fairly short today and go into
Yeah,
some other
sure.
topics. And then we're gonna dovetail into like kind of what's your Bitcoin story. So you want to kick
Oh,
us off?
yeah, no, my Bitcoin story. I'll just start with that. Like I got into Bitcoin in 2011 and I started joining meetups in Toronto in 2013 at Decentral where Ethereum was born, and that's where I met you and a whole bunch of other guys who I still know today. And those are the first crypto people I met in real life. Uh, in the beginning, there was only Bitcoin, so I started out as a Bitcoiner. Now I like multiple cryptocurrencies, of course. But yeah, now it's 2025. Crazy stuff's happening. Uh,
What's that line in the Bible where it's like in the beginning there was something
there's light.
or something like that? You're like in the beginning there was Bitcoin.
Yeah, in the beginning there was Bitcoin. Well,
But
now
yeah, it's true, right? We've been probably
there's
friends since
all the
2013, right, Antoine?
yeah, exactly.
And so I guess maybe back up a little bit. What's your story? Where are you from? Where were you born? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I was born in Japan. I'm half Belgian, half Canadian. I grew up around the world, and yeah.
Cool. Hey, by the way, I woke up this morning to some really interesting news in on the Japan front. Did you hear about the Metaplanet shareholder meeting?
I something like no, not
It's like
really.
it's all over the internet. It's oh my God, it was electric to say the least. Like literally like a couple thousand people have felt like in a room. David Bailey, the Metaplanet team, all just, on cloud nine, ushering in the Bitcoin revolution. So
I don't
Japan,
know.
just talk to me a little bit about Japan. I mean, how much do you know about Japan? I mean, why is Japan always so ahead of the curve when it comes to like robotics and just the future in general? Any thoughts on that?
No. Yeah, I think they're just a very disciplined and people. So I mean, I don't really have the answer, but
It's all good. Yeah, I kind of took us on a tangent, but let's bring it back. So Antoine, what initially, I think when I met you initially, you said you were like a self-proclaimed futurist of sort, right? Which was, I don't know, super refreshing to hear. I mean, I kind of consider myself a bit of a armchair futurist, but when did you take on that title?
well, I think it was after I read about the concept of the singularity. And well, when I heard about Bitcoin, it took me one or two tries before I said, okay, this is cool. When I read about the singularity, the first time I read it, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. I remember,
That book had an outsized impact on my
yeah, I read the book
identity,
later
my
too. I agree. There's definitely that singularity is near, and the age of spiritual machines and the age of intelligent machines. I read those books, and I don't know if I would be in Bitcoin if I hadn't read those books, to be honest.
Can you talk a little bit about it? Just because, like, again, I don't want to just stay on Bitcoin, but I want to kind of touch on these like peripheral topics
No,
that led
but
many of us to Bitcoin. Yeah. And
yes, of course.
I know we're going to
No,
get into some ordinals. We're going to talk about gold. We're going to talk about inflation. But
the,
talk to me
this
about that book.
this concept of the singularity and the idea of the law of accelerating returns, definitely like um, impacted all my decisions to get into Bitcoin. And it's just the idea that um, the evolution of technology is not happening at a linear rate, but an exponential rate. And we can see that in our daily lives. It's become more and more obvious. And the moment I read it, I was like, yeah, that's happening because I could clearly see throughout my life that the rate of development of computers was not happening on a linear scale and things were going faster and faster. Because, I remember when I was 5 years old, I had a computer with, like this many kilobytes. and every year, it'd go from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes to 4 megabytes. So I'm talking about like things like RAM. RAM would just is like doubles every couple of years, and storage space. So like I remember when I was a kid, I played games, and the games you would install them, they'd be like 1.2 megabytes or something.
A-
Um,
And talk about, so I guess what is the singularity? Where does that term come from?
well, it's really just the like acknowledgement that when things go so fast, that the um advancement will be so fast that we don't have the brain power now to be able to know what's going to happen next. So um it's just that like it reaches a point where we have no ability to comprehend. So all of our current models of how it might work break down, and we don't have any way to explain or to know what's going to happen next. Um,
And then how did that concept or that idea or that book eventually lead you to kind of see the light with Bitcoin so early? I mean, you must have been one of the earliest people that I know that got
well,
into
because
Bitcoin.
I knew that like computers were going to get better, phones were going to get better, technology was going to get better. And then I saw Bitcoin. I'm like, I can just send Bitcoin instead of putting in all my credit card details. That was my first thought, that my first realization. Of course, after that, there were many more realizations as well. But my first realization is you could just use this for online payments, and you wouldn't have to put in all your damn credit card details every single time. You could just send Bitcoin. And then I saw that the limit was 21 million. And I'm like, if you could just use this for online payments and it can never be more than 21 million, it's probably going to go up in price. And then I bought some. So
Oh,
that
I
was my
love that. I love how you just like simplified, like something that might have taken me like 3 hours to say, and you just said it like boom, boom, boom. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I
perfect.
mean, I did do 3 hours of research, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure you had to go down some deep rabbit holes. Cool. So let's keep going. Yeah. So then so you see the light. You're a self-proclaimed futurist. You get into Bitcoin. Um, and maybe just like, like I said, we did an interview about 5 years ago or so. So why don't we maybe fast forward to the last 5 years? Like why don't we talk a little bit about, what are some just overarching trends. Maybe talk a little bit about Ethereum because given that you and I had kind of a front row seat, I know you partake in a lot of hackathons around the world and usually win. uh, you know,
yeah.
and
Uh,
so talk a little bit about, the evolution of Ethereum. And then I want to kind of build up towards, what happened to you, I guess, a year and a half ago, right? When you started getting obsessed with this concept of ordinals and block space. But take us down the Ethereum road a little bit as well.
yeah, I mean, Ethereum, the idea was to make something like Bitcoin, but more programmable. So you could say, where all the money goes, and then have like full programmable control. So that's why smart contracts exist. And Ethereum is, like a massive, you got to say, like a massive civilizational achievement. It's number two on the crypto charts. It's $250 billion right now. I always tell people don't underestimate Bitcoin, but I should tell people don't underestimate Ethereum either. Um,
Right.
so
And so programmability was really what Vitalik brought to the world of blockchains, right? This ability to not just compute kind of like a calculator, right, in the Bitcoin world where you can do plus and minus quite easily, but
yeah,
really
exactly.
beyond that, it's not a whole lot more. Well, it wasn't up until recently. But then Ethereum really captured this ethos around, well, people are going to want to build decentralized applications, and how do we make it super simple and kind of straightforward for people to do
Yeah, and I
that?
always feel like, some FOMO because we were there around Ethereum when it started, but I don't think we fully grasped the magnitude of what was happening, and we didn't. I don't even know if the people who invested in Ethereum knew that it was going to be so big. Probably not. But if we could time travel, obviously we could have done way better. With Bitcoin too, obviously. But
And one thing you and I talk about, Antoine, and by the way, I don't know if you're reading stuff on your screen or something, but I can see your eyes going back and forth. What's the TLDR? I mean, over the last, let's say 3 to 4, I know you and I always kind of go back and forth and we talk about Bitcoin dominance, right? The chart on CoinMarketCap that talks about.
Yeah, I was
So
thinking about
what are your thoughts on where we are? I mean, I didn't check this
I
morning,
would say
but I think we're at 60% or something in terms of Bitcoin dominance within the crypto space. And just given how many crypto assets there are, don't you find that just a little bit interesting or like
it is
surprising?
it is interesting, and I was going to bring it up because we discussed it last time, and I think the Bitcoin dominance level. I'm looking at it now, hence why my eyes are
What
going
is
up.
it at?
It's about the same that we discussed like
Which
last
is 60?
4 years. I think I remember last time we said it was 65, and now it's like 60, 61. So, uh,
Cool, cool,
yeah,
cool.
pretty
So
high still.
and
But I
then
still, I
yeah.
still have the same opinion, which is it's going to go down in the long term. So,
Sure, sure. On an infinitely long time scale, I guess everything can be true. But would you also agree that Ethereum has lost market share in comparison to Bitcoin, like the price of
yeah,
Ethereum versus Bitcoin in the
has
last 3 years? Yeah.
it
So
has, and
so
but I
oh,
said
sorry, go
don't
ahead.
underestimate it. That's why I said don't underestimate Ethereum because um I like it can make a comeback.
Yes, it can. Anything's possible. So can you talk a little bit about like what's happened in Bitcoin in the last like since we last spoke? Like why has Bitcoin continued to march down this like domination kind of, matrix? Like how has it just been able to do so well, right? Both from a price perspective, from a mind share perspective, from a developer perspective, just it's many people wrote Bitcoin off, right? Oh, it's the beta max or whatever to the
Well,
VHS
there's a
type of thing.
few factors. I don't know if I could like put my finger on exactly why. It's probably a very complicated answer. You know, a lot of people think they can explain the economies, but I think like there's no way to prove them wrong. So people just throw out all these theories, and it's the same with Bitcoin. But I'll throw out my theories, okay? But I'm just saying that I'm like it might not be the real reasons. But number one is the amount of energy consumption that Bitcoin takes. Like that's not fake. It's not like an illusion. It uses 0.1% of the entire world's energy right now. It's the same energy consumption as Poland. Um, so so that's the kind of like the proof of work idea, right? It's just sort of busy work, but it actually does give Bitcoin value. So that energy is indirectly used to give Bitcoin value. It's not there's no direct use for it. Like the only direct use that energy has is it just produces heat, but indirectly it gives value to Bitcoin. And the fact is, it's burning so much energy that there's really nothing that can even compete with it. Not even other cryptocurrencies, not even anything else in the world. And that energy consumption is only going up. Um, but I mean, the true uh, like denominator or of Bitcoin power is not energy, but hash rate. And hash rate is a combination of energy and like computational chips. So you combine and like you can have a the same amount of energy, but if one chip is older than the other one, it'll produce less hash rate, right? So it's not just about it's about the computation as well.
Great, great start. So I was gonna say maybe if we can just you can push back on a couple of things. I heard you say things like busy work doesn't
Yeah,
really do anything but produce heat.
yeah.
And you and I even had a debate recently about whether or not mining is actually, validating transactions on the network or not. But can you talk a little bit about, well, what is mining for in terms of the Bitcoin
Well,
network? Like, what is it actually, like, what's it good for?
so all it does is it's just computers that are constantly guessing a number. They're just hashing. So you put one number in and another number comes out. But you don't know what the number that comes out is going to be. But if the number that comes out is under a certain amount, then you're able to mine some Bitcoin. But the thing is, it's so unlikely. You need to have like you need to hash a number like something like 10 to the 30 times. I forget the exact number right now. So like you need to do billions, trillions of hashes before you manage to get one that will make you Bitcoin. Um,
So you're talking about the actual inner workings of mining and the process, but I'm trying
yeah,
to
but
more
you
get at like
understand that.
what is the purpose of it? Like just solving math puzzles for the sake of it? Like to what end? Is it trying to accomplish something at the end of the day? Is it
Of it is just to create um some type of competition where um like it's not possible to cheat it. Like um it's just a way to create competition between um different actors that are putting resources to it to
Why?
Bitcoin.
Why are they
Um
putting resources towards it? Like, what is it like?
or Bitcoin.
If you strip Bitcoin mining completely away from Bitcoin, like, can you get transactions? Can I send you some Bitcoin and it be
Yes, no, you
validated
can.
without a third
Uh,
party or
the,
no?
the reason it's like this is because um you have to be able to stop people from making malicious transactions. So the competition means that you have to put all this energy and all these resources in order to just make one malicious transaction. Or well, effectively, it would break the network. But
Exactly. So that's what I'm trying to get at is that so it has a purpose, right? Which is to prevent malicious transactions. So
yeah,
like a double spend
yeah,
effectively, right?
exactly.
Yeah, cool. Cool. So okay, so let's keep going, Antoine. So what else has happened? I want us to maybe dive in a little bit deeper in terms of some of the so like you said, Bitcoin, I mean it's hard to pin down exactly why it's done so well. I mean, I would argue things like network effects probably matter. I'd argue that, the
No, because yeah,
architecture.
I would say that the amount of energy consumption is like something that doesn't let other networks get to that level. And then there's, the yeah, like you said, network effect and mind share. Like everybody's thinking Bitcoin, Bitcoin, so they think of buying Bitcoin first. Um, and then there's developers. Like Bitcoin has a lot of developers working on it all the time. It's like probably number one in the cryptos in terms of like open source commits. At least last time I checked. I'm not 100% sure about that. Don't quote me on that.
Decentralization.
Um, yeah, that comes with um, like the mining power. Yep.
Exactly. So there's probably a whole regulatory, somewhat clarity. You have adoption from, public companies and nation states. And I mean, there's like Bitcoin has really elevated its game, right? You could argue in the last few years. But today I want to focus more on kind of the technical sides of Bitcoin, right? So can you talk a little bit about one thing that I find really interesting is this kind of evolution of Bitcoin, right? Something that occurred in the last few years, namely things around Taproot and whatnot, that really brought a lot of that programmability to Bitcoin, despite perhaps many within the Bitcoin ecosystem not even wanting these developments to occur. But can you talk a little bit about why Taproot was brought into existence? Maybe even go back a bit further and talk about SegWit. But for those who are trying to kind of get their head around, Bitcoin and where it is today, can you give us a little TLDR?
Well, to be honest, I was not following all of the Bitcoin developments as they happened. Um, uh, but um, I I don't know if like all of the changes that were made had their intended effects. Um, for example, I think SegWit and Taproot were supposed to make Bitcoin more efficient and save on gas. Like SegWit was to save on gas, and then open the door to Taproot, which was also to make Bitcoin more efficient. But also it allowed people to store more data on Bitcoin, and that's the part I got interested in because I like um, this concept of on-chain NFTs, um, where you can just store data on Bitcoin and commoditize it. So that's when Ordinals came out, and Ordinals was only enabled because of Taproot. Um, or like ordinal inscriptions. And my area of focus right now is the commoditization of data on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is you can use it as a currency, and everyone is using it as a currency, but also the network is very secure to store small amounts of data that can be stored for a very long time and not changed and not tampered with. So it's sort of like a secondary, very powerful use case of Bitcoin, which also increases the value of Bitcoin in my opinion. But when you take those datas, what if you turn it into an ownable asset? Then you're able to get more economic value out of that data. So it's kind of a sorry, just a siren going on in the background. Like a marriage between like the most safe place to store public data in the world, plus making that ownable and tradable. Um, and I always say, if you want to put data on Bitcoin, there's no downside to making it into an NFT, because then if you want, you can just sell the NFT and recoup some of your costs. So it actually makes it cheaper to store data on Bitcoin. So I um I think that whatever data you put on Bitcoin will have like a certain floor price just due to the size of the data. Um, and that applies to like both valuable data and just like junk data. They both have a floor price. The valuable data might be slightly more valuable. So, but every time you put something onto Bitcoin, you have to pay a transaction fee. Um, so it's proportional to the amount of data you want to put on. So, if this takes off, there'll be a competition for anybody who wants to store data on Bitcoin. They'll have to compete with each other to pay the transaction fees to store that they want to store. So that's also going to make all of the existing data that's in the form of NFT and ownable assets also way more valuable. So I just think like I call these block-based NFTs. Essentially, it's an NFT that's a certain amount of data on Bitcoin, represents a certain amount of data on Bitcoin, and the more the size of the data, the more valuable it is. Um, so yeah, I just think people are going to want to store data on Bitcoin, and they're going to be competing with each other to pay higher and higher transaction fees, and that's going to make that existing data on the Bitcoin more valuable as well. And
So,
that
so
wasn't until like 2023.
yeah, so Anna, can you talk a little bit, just maybe in more slow motion, or not too much slow motion, but like about the evolution in that time frame? So I know you weren't super into like the SegWit, Taproot, but the Taproot specifically kind of opened the door for a lot of things to happen, right, on Bitcoin, like all this data embedding and NFTs on Bitcoin,
Yeah,
etc.
I think
Programmability of
like
Bitcoin all
the
came about
data.
because of Taproot. So can you kind of double click on Taproot and the evolution of like, Ordinals, BRC20, inscriptions, and kind of like
Yeah,
what came
so
first and how does that tree of like
from,
that world look like? Yeah.
from what I understand, the ability to upload large amounts of data to Bitcoin, thanks to Taproot, was more of an unintended side effect. But in my opinion, it's great for Bitcoin. Some other people don't agree because they think that it's just unnecessarily increasing transaction fees. But I can walk you through the history of ordinals. So they launched in 2023. People were racing to make inscriptions. All the inscriptions are numbered from zero to like until the last inscription. Right now we're at 91 million or something. And all the early ones, people knew they would have value. So like sub 100, sub 1,000. So people were racing to make those. Bunch of inscriptions were made, and then somebody decided would have the smart idea of creating something called BRC20 tokens, where you just inscribe text,
Wait,
and then
wait, before we go to BRC20, so on the ordinal side of things, you said it's numbered from zero to, I guess, 91
yeah,
million, but can you talk about how it's not like that numbering system is actually a parallel kind of independent ledger of sorts and like how that
yeah,
dovetails into Bitcoin?
yeah, because so Ordinals is a meta protocol on top of Bitcoin. So there's an Ordinal indexer that reads all the Bitcoin transactions that are on chain, and then makes a database of um, Satoshi numbers and inscription numbers and inscriptions. So it looks at all the transactions. When you make a correctly formatted inscription, it will say like, okay, this file is associated with um, this Satoshi, and this Satoshi exists in this address. So all that information is in the ordinals indexer. But if you lose it, you can just re-index using the Bitcoin blockchain. So it's possible to, because the ordinals indexer is off-chain, it's not like secure in the same way as Bitcoin. But if you have the same rules, you can just re-index all of it easily. Um,
And what
you,
was the thinking behind putting that outside or like a meta protocol, like you said, outside of the Bitcoin network? Why, what is there was there no way to kind of have this indexing system within Bitcoin? Probably a
yeah,
dumb
well,
question.
um, yeah, so like the Bitcoin full node is like 650 gigabytes. That includes all of the entire history of Bitcoin. And the Ordinals indexer is like 250 gigabytes or something. It's too expensive, too much to put on chain. And even if you put it on chain, it wouldn't make sense because then you'd have to index more. But um, yeah, like it's not it's th things in the indexer that's too expensive and not possible to store on chain. So um, yeah, I guess
And then can you also talk about how while the indexer is outside of the Bitcoin blockchain, the actual images and the NFTs, if you will, the
yeah,
data
exactly.
is actually and differentiate that or contrast that to Ethereum? Because I find that super fascinating.
Yeah, no, it is interesting because most Ethereum NFTs, while it is possible to do on-chain Ethereum NFTs, I guess just the culture and the economics dictated that most people would store the images of the NFT off the blockchain because it was cheaper and more convenient. But then they would store the token ID on chain. So on the blockchain, it says what the token ID is, and but the actual image is stored off chain. But when it comes to ordinal inscriptions, the actual image is stored on chain, which in my opinion gives it a lot of value. But the token ID, like the SAT number, is stored off chain. So it's like the opposite other way around.
And I think
Yeah.
someone recently mentioned, maybe it might have been Toby in my interview with him, but like how when the FTX, the government came in and essentially confiscated a lot of the assets there, a lot of the people who had things like Bored Apes and whatnot on Ethereum, they would try and open up their image and it would just be like, oh, now the property of the federal, whatever, the government of the United States, etc. Mainly because of that fact that the assets themselves are not truly immutable and are not on the Ethereum blockchain, right? Did you hear about that or no?
No,
Yeah,
I'd love to talk
but
about that.
I don't know if you can face your camera down. I just see like, yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a lot better. Cool, cool. So okay, so now maybe let's switch gears and talk. So you were talking about ordinals and then BRC20 and all these other kind of things started coming
Yeah,
up, right?
BSC20 is just a like absolutely ridiculous token protocol that somehow works really well. When it first came out, I thought it was very stupid and I didn't participate, but I now regret that decision. Uh, but essentially, on ordinals, you have all these inscriptions, right? So you can put any file, any text, image, whatever, and I guess an inscription number. So you can do text files, right? So some really smart guy called Domo, um, that's his pseudonym, decided I'm going to make a protocol where you just put some text, right? So that on top of the ordinals indexer, there's also going to be a BRC20 indexer. So ordinals is a meta protocol on Bitcoin, and BRC is a meta protocol of ordinals. So the BRC20 indexer looks at all the inscriptions. Well, it's really looking at Bitcoin on-chain data too, because all these text files are on-chain. And each BRC20 token says mint or deploy or transfer. So it looks at all these mint, deploy, transfer events. And then it calculates all of them, and then it calculates the balance of each address. And that's it according to the rules. So the rules are you deploy a token, you say, here's the supply, here's the amount you can mint. When it reaches the supply, no more can be minted. And that's it.
Cool. So I think a lot of people might not know. So I mean, I maybe should have said this at the top of the show, but like Antoine's Um, a bunch of things. He's a self-proclaimed futurist. He's also a Bitcoin community organizer. He's been hosting something called Bitcoin Bay here in Toronto, maybe the longest standing Bitcoin meetup session series, yeah?
In Toronto, yeah.
And you never took a break, right? Like it just kept going for what, for
Yeah,
now,
I
like
mean,
4 or 5 years?
like clockwork, yeah. Since
Yeah.
24.
He's also the founder of a project that is called Bitbars, right? Bitbars.xyz. So we can maybe talk a little bit
Yeah,
about that. And then most recently he's been helping Matador on some of the projects, and maybe there's like an announcement coming soon. But he's been deep in the weeds helping Matador bring gold onto the Bitcoin blockchain. Yeah.
yes, yes. So Bitbars is basically my expression of the block space NFT idea, right? So I'm like, these things are gonna have value. You just put files on the chain. Doesn't matter what they are. So we just uploaded a bunch of gold bar looking NFTs, SFGs, SVGs, sorry. And there's different sizes, 1 kilobyte, 2 kilobytes, 4, 8, up to 256. And I've uploaded about 500 megabytes of bitbars to Bitcoin. Um, and that's about like 0.1% of the entire blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain size. Um,
Wait, say that again. 0 point what?
0.1% of the entire Bitcoin block,
Dang,
because
that's crazy.
Bitcoin blockchain is about 650 gigabytes. And I've created about 500 megabytes of bitbars and maybe 200 megabytes of other stuff. So yeah. Um,
So that's why they call you the block space baron? Is that?
but like I'm still struggling to market these. Well, the real fundamental issue is that the transaction fees are still low, right? So I can't really sell them until the transaction fees go up, because you can just mint them, right? It's cheaper to mint them than to buy them until the transaction fees go up. When the transaction fees go up, then it'll become cheaper to buy large inscriptions than to mint them. At that point, I'll be able to market them much more easily. Um, so
Recently you've been talking about bringing gold onto the Bitcoin blockchain, right? Whether it be through your work with Matador or through Bitbars. But can you just talk more like high level, kind of like why is it that you find it
well, look,
interesting to marry
I'm not
those
an
two worlds?
expert in real world assets, but I understand NFTs quite well, and I know that Bitcoin is the gold standard of blockchains. So I think it just makes sense to, if we're going to combine physical assets with digital. I'm also very interested in that, creating phygitals, so like a physical digital combination asset. I think like the most sort of interesting memeable starting point is Bitcoin and gold. We figure out how to do Bitcoin plus gold, then we can do Litecoin plus silver. We can do Dogecoin plus bronze. We can do any blockchain, any physical asset combination. Once we figure out how to, do make a combination with the processes where you can redeem it, and um, it's sort of like a non-obvious thing. I don't think like digitals seems like such an obvious idea, but I haven't really seen many people do it. It's very sparse still. But it seems like something that could be huge. So we're just trying to connect um, Bitcoin and gold into like a physical object. We're also trying to create ordinals that represent the value of gold that you can redeem for gold as well. So there's a few teams trying to do that. With Bitbars, we made a collection of 1,000 initial bitbars called Bitbars Genesis. They're all 1 kilobyte bitbars, and they were all made within the first 100,000 inscriptions. We call it sub 100K. So I think it's like one of two or three, or maybe there's four collections, I think, that are sub 100K, that are 1,000 inscriptions or more. So it's sort of a very powerful collection. And we want to connect those with gold bars as well. So we're trying to figure out, if you have like a Genesis bit bar, what do you like? Can you redeem it for physical gold? You get the gold delivered. Well, that's what we're working on with Matador. Um,
Cool. I
yeah,
think, yeah, people will learn more about that in the coming weeks. Exciting times. I like the project. So tell me, what else are you seeing? I don't know. Are you like what excites you nowadays in the Bitcoin space? Is there anything else that you're working on right now?
yeah. I think I might be a little bit too deep in the weeds with Bitcoin. I'm trying to branch out to other blockchains, but I just keep getting pulled even deeper into Bitcoin because I'm trying to create like a Bitcoin transaction fee token, which is like a BRC20 token. You can have a runes version as well. Essentially, it's an unlimited mint token, and then anybody can mint it. And the idea is you mint it when it's cheap, and then you use it for transaction fees when the transaction fees go up. So this unlimited mint token, it's a bit counterintuitive, but I think that even though it's unlimited mint, there's still a cost you have to pay. You have to pay one Bitcoin transaction fee in order to mint one token. So when transaction fees go up, they'll probably get a market price, and that market price will probably go track the price of transaction fees closer than Bitcoin does. So if you want a long transaction fees, or if you want to hedge for high transaction fees, you just buy these tokens. It's called BFEE, BFEE. And yeah, I mean, I'm developing this concept. The other concept I'm developing is the idea of a counterparty inscriptions protocol. So you have the Ordinals inscriptions, then you have something called Bitcoin stamps, which uses counterparty, but it puts the data directly into the UTXOs. A Bitcoin stamps is actually even more immutable than the ordinal inscriptions.
If I'm
But
not
or,
mistaken, you said Domo, he's from Toronto, but the stamps is also created by a guy named Mike, right? He's
yeah,
from
no,
Toronto. It's kind of
yeah, yeah,
crazy how,
yeah, too. Like if I were to create, I'm gonna call it counter inscriptions, then that would be like 3 for 3 from Toronto. So
wild. No, I mean, I remember you talking about Counterparty way back in the day, right? Where you were gifting people like me and others these like rare Pepes, and I was just like, dude, you have completely lost the plot. Only to discover like,
I find myself struggling to even explain some of these things, but it just like some of these things they seem so obvious to me, but it's hard to explain. Like you were asking me about SegWit and Taproot, and I'm like, I don't know every single detail, but I know that block space is valuable. That's kind of like what I'm trying to get at, you know?
well, maybe we can like talk a little bit more about that in a bit, right? Because I fear if we talk too much about that, we're gonna probably lose most of the listeners. I know it's an idea that I still to this day struggle to comprehend, but I know when people like you and Toby, the founder of Ordinals, bought. By the way, if anyone wants to see that interview, it's a previous interview I did. You guys are very bullish on it, but I
Yeah.
want to just kind of go
Let me just say
back.
one
Yeah,
thing.
go ahead, go ahead.
If you want to if this idea of block space being valuable piques your interest, okay, you want to explore that. You know, maybe you don't want to write it off right away. You just want us to be like explore and maybe check out if it's true or not. Look at the minting of 4 MB inscriptions. If you go to or.io and you sort by largest, you'll see all the 4 MB inscriptions. And like I challenge you to disprove that these 4 MB inscriptions are valuable. I challenge you to go try and buy one of these 4 MB inscriptions and see how much you have to pay, right? It's not an easy thing to buy. It's a very illiquid market, but they do have value. So I challenge you to prove that it doesn't have value. Challenge you to go buy one for cheap. But if the 4 MB inscriptions are valuable, then why aren't 2 MB inscriptions not valuable? Why are 1 MB inscriptions not valuable? In fact, why are 100 KB inscriptions not valuable as well? So that's where I'll leave
It's
it.
an interesting thesis. It's an interesting thesis. I was gonna go more in the direction of like gold and Bitcoin's blockchain, but before we do, talk about rare Pepes, talk about Lord Keck a little bit. You and I had a
Yeah,
really
just
interesting
the
conversation.
whole the whole meme world, you know, like well, probably some people's ears will perk up when they hear Pepe, sort of like um, just like it's interesting how memes can result in the dissemination of information. Even technical information on Bitcoin can be disseminated through memes. Um, like the Pepe's, they're really some of the first NFTs of all time that happened on Bitcoin. Um, so back then, we didn't even call them NFTs. The word NFT didn't even exist back in 2016, as far as I know. Or I wasn't aware of it when we were making Pepe's. So yeah, we were just making these tokens on Counterparty, putting pictures to them, and these guys they made like a collection called Rare Pepe's, and they invited anybody to submit um, like Pepe cards, right? They just had to be Pepe related, and then you had to put it on a Counterparty asset, and then send it to the rare Pepe scientists, and they would put it in the collection. So I put a bunch of rare Pepes, and I bought a bunch of other rare Pepes. It's all counterparty assets. You have to pay Bitcoin transaction fees.
A- And if I'm not mistaken, that was not embedded into the Bitcoin blockchain, right? It was similar to how Ethereum does it. Is that correct?
Or no, no, the images were off chain, but the tokens they were on chain. Also,
Right.
counterparty is also meta protocol on Bitcoin. But back then we didn't have the word meta protocol. We like now we call it the meta protocol, but and
So it's not the first time people are trying to embed or, use the Bitcoin blockchain as like a pointer, as a embeddable kind of source where you can, keep the integrity of an image or some
no, but
text.
inscription was the first time that on-chain NFTs really took off. Like as far as I can tell in the entire crypto ecosystem.
Wait, what was that? Say that again. What
Uh,
ordinals you said?
Ordinals is the first time that on-chain NFTs really took off in a big way. Like they
Mm,
existed before, but only in small doses.
yeah.
Uh,
So talk to me about something. We were talking about, putting gold on the Bitcoin blockchain. Now you're not technically putting gold on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? Because the
no,
gold
you're making an
itself
asset
is
that you can redeem for gold. Yeah.
exactly. But can you talk about some of the technical challenges involved in tokenizing gold? And by the way, Max Kaiser just tweeted something out yesterday saying that he believes that a gold-backed stablecoin will outperform
Oh,
USDT,
I
USD.
think that a stable coin that's neither gold backed or US dollar backed will outperform both of them.
So backed by what then? Backed by both?
Well, backed by, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be something physical. It might be the value of labor. It could be something else. I think that my idea for the transaction fee coin is somewhat of a stable coin, right? If you consider transaction fees to be stable, although it's not currently a stable market, but you could see that as a stable coin.
That's another one of those topics that makes my brain go a little bit haywire. But yeah, I mean, again, it sounds
I think
intelligent.
that what Max Kaiser is saying, it may be true, but there's going to be another form of stablecoin that is bigger than both of those.
Mm, mm. Hey, so can you talk about what are some of the technical challenges involved in tokenizing gold on Bitcoin blockchain? And like maybe in the past versus now, and like what again, what are some of the developments as of late that really excite you about how
Well, I
this
think
possibility is?
the challenge is like how do you do it in a decentralized way? Like I could just set up a gold shop and say, um, I'm going to redeem these tokens. You bring some tokens to my shop and I'll give you gold. I mean, you could do that, but how do you make sure that the gold is secure? It's not really a blockchain problem. It's like just goes back to the regular challenge of making storing gold in a safe place. But maybe it can be done in like and you don't store gold in one place, but in multiple locations. But I'm not sure who's doing that. I'm certainly not working on that right now. Where like a decentralized gold storage vault solution. But I think that's probably where it has to go.
So I have another question. So in terms of Bitbars, maybe some of the work you're doing with Matador, can you share some of the lessons that you've learned that might be valuable for others? So like things that maybe like let's say you're speaking to the Antoine from a year and a half ago.
Well,
Um,
I have my personal lessons and my personal weaknesses, I suppose. I don't know if it applies to everybody, but I need to do a better job marketing what I create. Um, but in terms of lessons I think a lot of people could learn from, uh, like you gotta watch out for Bitcoin transaction fees because they're probably going to go through the roof at some point, and you won't be able to send Bitcoin at a reasonable rate. Um, well, also the flip side of that is um, you could probably make some bets on transaction fees going up by buying or by creating large inscriptions. So you can long transaction fees by creating large inscriptions on Bitcoin or minting BRC20 tokens. That's a way to long the transaction fees going up. I mean, like bet that they'll go up and make money from it. So sort of like for me, it's really just a gold rush of Bitcoin block space gold rush, but also other blockchains too. Block space gold rush. I really am super bullish on the value of block space. I even like talked to one guy who thinks that block space is going to replace blockchains as a sort of a valuable resource, and people are just going to have this resource called block space without even understanding what blockchains really mean. They're going to forget the word blockchain. I mean, this is like probably even more bullish than me, but if you can believe that.
And you're probably one of the few people that I know that attends almost every Bitcoin conference in the world. Can you
No, not
talk?
even.
Well, maybe not all of them, but like I see you at pretty much all of them. And if I'm not going to one, I know you are. Can you talk a little bit about maybe I don't know, just over the last year, maybe some of your main takeaways from these conferences, something that you've learned that you maybe might not have?
Well, for me, it's yeah, no, it's really about the connections you make. That's the most valuable part of going to these conferences. That's why I highly recommend it, even if it's always a question, right? Should I spend money on, plane tickets or should I hold crypto? Because crypto might go up. So it's a trade-off, but the connections you make tend to be worth the trade-off because um yeah, I don't regret going to conferences at all. And multiple times when I've asked myself, is this worth it? And I come back and I'm like, yeah, it was worth it.
Always. Hey, Antoine, I know another kind of common interest for you and I is, well, I think for a lot of people is AI. Have you pondered much about the intersection between AI and Bitcoin and kind of where do you land there in terms of uh yeah, what might be some use cases where Bitcoin can serve
Well,
AI, vice
I don't
versa?
have any fancy theories for you there. The only fancy theory I have is that if an AI was to use money, then like it'd probably be crypto, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably the obvious I mean, not maybe not so obvious big one is that when yeah it's people talk about agents and swarm of agents and eventually humanoids and robotics and all that and it's like it just feels that
Not going to be using dollars and yen and
yeah
they'll be
exactly they're
using
not yeah like they're not gonna do like
Bitcoin.
an NEFT or Swift payment or whatever it's probably gonna be like a lightning transaction.
Yeah, or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And we touched on like mining earlier, right? I think a lot of people also consider Bitcoin to be maybe not environmentally friendly because of the energy kind of
Oh yeah,
usage.
no, it's
Can you talk
very
about
interesting.
that? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you also agree? Do you disagree? Are you kind of
Well,
tracking?
I found myself like sort of on the middle of the road on that one. On one side, um, it's like Bitcoin does the world a lot of good, uncensorable transactions. You can do cross-border payments. So you could say like it's worth the energy consumption. On the other side, it is using 0.1% of the entire world's energy. So that is included a lot of fossil fuel consumption. Uh, like you can't prevent that. So it's a huge polluter for sure. Um, on the other hand, I do think that we're going to transition to renewable energy quite rapidly, not for ethical reasons, but just for economic reasons. So it might not be, I predict, like a huge issue forever. Because if like 95% of the energy of Bitcoin mining comes from, say, solar energy, I don't think we'll have as many concerns as about the um, like greenhouse emissions. But yeah, but in the transition between now and then, it is a problem, and there's a lot of emissions. But I don't
Uh,
know if
are you tracking the SBR, the whole Strategic Bitcoin Reserve conversation happening in the US right now?
not extremely closely, no.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting how I think in the last week or so they came out and said that they'd like to use they want to use essentially they don't want to tax people to go buy in Bitcoin. So they want to use net neutral ways of acquiring Bitcoin. So one of the kind of I don't know ideas that they're floating is selling gold. So there's all this talk around auditing, the Fort Knox, and then I think it's like 600
No,
or
listen,
700 billion dollars worth of gold that's sitting there, and they're
like
saying, hey, do we
all these,
sell some of that? Any thoughts on that?
I hear people talk about political conversations all the time, and um, because I'm sort of an expert in something, Bitcoin and crypto. I can see how people are, um, like how experts in other topics. I know that I'm not an expert in other topics. So when it comes to like trade wars and tariffs, I may have opinions, but I know that my opinion is probably not as good as an expert. But when it comes to Bitcoin, I'm pretty sure that the putting Bitcoin in the strategic reserve is a highly intelligent move. This is my expert opinion, right? Um, Especially if you do it before other countries do. So yeah, no, that's and selling gold to acquire Bitcoin and other cryptos is also very intelligent as well. So that's my quote unquote expert opinion on that, being an expert in the field. So yeah.
Given your expert opinion, do you have any thoughts on quantum
Well, I'm not
potentially
not an
potentially
expert.
coming for Bitcoin wallets? No.
Yeah, no, like as far as I know, it's Bitcoin will just have to upgrade the protocol, and everybody will have to move their Bitcoin from old wallets to new wallets. And if you don't move it to a new wallet in time, then it can get hacked. So that's how it's going to work, probably.
So I can, we're about 50 minutes in, 5-0. So I think we got another few minutes left, but maybe take us back a bit. I was going to say, looking back, over the last 10, 11 years, I'm sure when you and I are like 80, we'll probably sit down and like take a look at some of these conversations and be like, oh, let's check out that interview I did of you back in 2024, 2025. But can you talk a little bit about some of your proudest moments or achievements that you had within the blockchain space? I mean, if I had to guess, it's probably, being a community organizer is probably something that you look fondly upon. I'm sure the
Yeah, so
Ordinals and Bitbars story was something that you're very proud of. But can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I mean, sure. So I'll list some of them on my list. Um, One is yeah, creating those rare pepes, and one of the ones I created turned out to be the first AI NFT in history. Apparently, it's called Pepime, Pepeme.
Huge, huge. But
Um,
didn't you get into Bitcoin before a dollar or something as well? Would you consider that part of your
yeah,
proud achievements?
yeah, definitely add that to the list. I got into Bitcoin in $2. Um, I would say like the work that I've done at Ucash, where we managed to get up to like number 21 on CoinMarketCap for a limited amount of time, but that's definitely one of my proudest achievements. Um, I still talk to people who remember that. They're like, "Oh, Ucash, I remember I've seen that like back in 2018." We also did something called an initial bounty offering, which was an extremely novel way of distributing the token other than ICOs. We got people to do bounties and they earned the cryptocurrency instead of buying it. So there was a bunch of people from Indonesia, Nigeria. That was like really their first taste of crypto. Because they had no money to buy crypto. So they were able to do bounties. So I would definitely list that. The initial bounty offering, inventing that with the Ucash team. Um, then I would say organizing some of the largest meetups in the world with you. Add that to the list. I want to do that again. Um, we had like up to 700-person meetups. Then I would say like all the connections that I've made, with amazing people in Toronto and conferences, yourself included. Then I would say becoming a massive block space NFT producer. 600 megabytes so far. It's definitely right at the top of the list of
I mean,
my.
that is crazy to think, no?
Yeah.
You have like you've I guess inserted what like almost or half a
I
gigabyte
grew.
worth of
I
data into
grew.
the Bitcoin blockchain. I
Yeah.
mean, I know some people are gonna hate you for that, right? It's like, oh,
No, no, no.
you're just clogging up the Bitcoin blockchain, but
And I also
that's
increased
just
the size of Litecoin as well by 10 gigabytes in 2 weeks. So I grew the size of the Litecoin
okay,
blockchain.
tell that story before we bring this one to a close. The one about
Yeah,
Charlie
no,
Lee.
so I made light bars on Litecoin, right? It's relatively obscure, but
That was one of the funniest conversations ever, by the way,
yeah,
in
no, like
Nashville.
if you go to the Litecoin blockchain size chart, you'll see a little blip. That was essentially solely me. So I increased the size of Litecoin by 10% in 2 weeks. This is what I say about marketing. I got these crazy
But
achievements. I don't.
do you remember that conversation with Charlie when you told him that?
Yeah, so we went to Litecoin Summit in Nashville that was next to the Bitcoin conference, and Charlie Lee happened to be there and was like, "Hi," like we said, and he's like kind of in a rush. But then I showed him the blockchain size chart and the little blip. I'm like, "Have you seen this? Do you know what this is?" It's like, "Oh, that's probably inscriptions, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I did that." I kind of did a double take, and I only spent $5,000 only, right? I mean, but like compared to the power of Litecoin, that's extremely cheap. Um, so 2 weeks, I filled up all the blocks with inscriptions, and at the end of it, Litecoin was 10% bigger. And then I told Charlie Lee, I could double the size of Litecoin if I really wanted to, and he said, "Please don't." Yeah.
I've got the Litecoin that you bought me that day as well.
No, I love Litecoin. I think Litecoin is underrated compared to other cryptocurrencies, compared to Bitcoin, compared to Ethereum. It has a lot of adoption, a lot of trading volume. But the block space is supremely undervalued. So if you want to go look into making Litecoin
We,
inscriptions,
we need to
large,
do like a whole hour and a half or something on block space and really kind of dig
yeah,
into it
no,
because I
I
feel
think
like it's like a
it's more
topic
of
you're very bullish on, and it's going to be
a
one of those
workshop.
things where 10 years is going to go by and I'm going to be like, oh my God, I should have listened to Antoine.
I should do a workshop on it and we get people to ask questions. That's like in the
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, it's been almost an hour. Anything else you want to just share in closing, Antoine? And we're working very closely together on some of these projects. So it'd be nice to do like a regular session where we just check in and, maybe just give people an update in terms of what's going on with
Um, yeah, no, I just think like it's interesting. There's a lot of focus on creating new blockchains, NFTs. But I kind of I heard somebody mention that when Counterparty came out, nobody was building on Bitcoin, right? But there's still things that nobody's building on Bitcoin that people are sort of ignoring, I guess, out of ignorance. One of those things is the block space. But another one is Counterparty. Counterparty is also very slept on, undervalued. It's some of the first NFTs that ever came out, and the market cap is like what, like $10 million? It's just ridiculously undervalued. So, I just want to let people know, look into Counterparty, look into block space, large ordinal inscriptions. Um, look into Bitstamps. If ordinals is undervalued, Bitstamps is even more undervalued. Bitcoin stamps, I mean, sorry. Um, yeah, that's it.
cool. That's awesome, Antoine. Well, thank you for your time. And yeah, as usual, let's keep building on Bitcoin. Yeah.
Sounds good, man.
All
See
right.
you
I'm
later.
gonna bring this one to a close. Take care.